much for inviting me. I'm really thrilled to be in this exhibition. I'm just going to start off with a short introduction that I'm just going to read from my notes. So I would describe my drawings as fragments or captured moments. They're predominantly figurative, and many are images of solitary, twinned or tripled figures, either in preoccupied states of contemplation or undertaking unexplained tasks with determination. They often interact or are fused with flora and fauna. I like to refer to natural history with all of its relationships and characteristics to suggest notions of the psyche and being human. So many of my drawings often suggest an in-between state and maintain a deliberate ambiguity like a breath between the before and the after. I love the relationship between the immediacy of pencil on paper and the language that can run both visually and through the materials themselves. For me, the surface of the paper is like a permeable threshold between worlds, which can be pressed through from both sides. When drawing on paper, I am immersed in an imagined space, considering each image I project into it as glimpses that may be rising up from the subconscious. Each hold the possibility that they can spill off the page, whether this is a suggestion of something occurring just beyond the edges of the paper, or physically entering into our realm through installations and hand-drawn animations. So I'm going to start with the process, the actual physical act of drawing. And I think one of the things, things that really caught me as well about the title of A Line Around an Idea, it was considering that every drawing is a series of lines. It's lines upon lines upon lines. So whether like the very start of an idea is just like a simple line or a doodle, or in my case, my drawings are a process of just layering and layering, and the larger the drawings go, the more that layering happens. So it's that real sense of just overlaying and overlaying, and it's all about that pressure of the line and just really starting to create that illusion of depth. But essentially it is just that combination of lines. And I think this is one of the things that I find so beautiful about drawing, that it is about this like bringing all of that together, those meditative kind of qualities to it. I think especially with like when working on something that's actually quite large and detailed, it is a real process of this rhythm of days after days, weeks after weeks of just layering and layering and just gradually intensifying the pressure. But essentially, what is a line that can become something that's really sort of quite dark and has a lot of depth, or can just trail away to absolutely nothing, to just like a hair's width. So for me, this is where it all starts. So every idea that I have, and this is a constant process that for as long as I can remember, this is what I would refer to as my stream of consciousness. And so there's a real process in my studio of just getting ideas down onto paper, and in a way I use this very much like journaling. So it can be any idea that pops into my head, just getting it down. Sometimes it's playing around with different materials, sometimes it's working with like a whole lot of different like resource material that I'm just playing around with. And so this is a real process of just discovering actually like what's in there. And so at this point in time, I'm really just, there's quite a franticness to this part of my practice. And one idea might immediately lead on to something else, or it might spark another idea. So in a way, I'm working really, really fast. And this is where I will kind of lean in and just let the flow, just go with the flow. And then I'll stand back and lay everything out and actually see, okay, what are these telling me? Are there like different motifs that are being repeated? Are there just like some burning like images that I'm just keep finding again and again? And also, I never put these into any kind of chronological order. These are all because they all go into a mix, and so there may be some ideas I may have had that have come out of these like streams of consciousness maybe like a few years ago. but then sort of start to make sense over time, and depending on this mix. And so sometimes I will show these together in like vitrines, or show them as clusters, because once I start to put them together, you can sort of start to draw different kinds of relationships between them as well. And I think as well, I'll just mention here that working in this like figurative way, there is a site, I would say it's a site that there is a sense of narrative to the work, but that narrative is deliberately ambiguous. And so there's, so it's really for, I like to open up for the viewer to actually, create their own narratives around them, to actually get a sense of, how they're connecting to the images themselves and what they take away. And so it's always a sense of there's a sense of something going on, but it's always really open-ended. And these are just some of my early drawings as well. So these are between 2002 and 2005, because I came out of art college predominantly as a sculptor. And so I was actually making like huge metalwork sculptures. This is back in, graduated in 2000, so this is 23 years ago. And I know when I first graduated, I realised that there was always so much drawing happening. I never really showed those as finished, as sort of final pieces, just because at the time I hadn't considered that was, for some reason I hadn't considered that as an option. Whereas when I first graduated, I started to learn more about the discourse around drawing. And this is where I really started to understand that that's where my practice was, and that was actually very quickly became my primary practice. But I think that sense of the experience of thinking in sculptural terms, I think that's what's also, I can still see that it still holds some significance to me as well. And so this is when I'm thinking about, the plane of the surface of the paper and that imagined space beyond the page. And as you'll see in a little bit, some of those will then be pulled off the page and actually off the paper and into the space that we occupy as an installation. But yeah, this is, in my early days of drawing, I would draw on absolutely anything that I could find, mostly when I was at work as well. So it was usually anything that, pencils and paper that I could just fit into my pocket. And so generally these works were done when my boss's back was turned, even though, as I say, my boss always knew that I was drawing, and also stealing the paper bags from the shop as well. So they knew exactly what was going on. So as I said before, the use of nature that's been an ongoing theme within my work for as long as I can remember. And I think some of this also dates right back to when I was a child as well. I was always drawing as a child anyway, so I always making, and I also would remember some of my old books, it's like picture books, being like nature books, and some of my favourites. And I really remember as right back from when I was really little, looking at all these charts of ecosystems and different species and how they all related to each other. And I think even back then, I just really loved the idea of rearranging all these hierarchies and swapping characteristics over, and actually, because I was just so fascinated by nature anyway, right from being really small, that I was always just intrigued by everything to do with nature and just how they interacted. And I think as I got a little bit older, this fascination grew, but also thinking about particularly about the way that the relationships within nature and sort of parasitic and harmonious relationships and these fine balances, but also how it's in my mind I can mix them all up and rearrange everything, and then it's open up a whole load of new possibilities. And I think this and also over time just started to really understand that it was one of the things that I was doing when I was thinking about that rearranging was also relating it back very much to human nature, and how basically it's how it feels to be human, And so it's like, and also it's like tapping into my interest in like those thresholds between like the subconscious and consciousness. So I'm just going to grab my bottle of water, which I forgot to put out for myself before. So, I mean, I could talk through, I mean, each drawing does have its own, I can talk about like each drawing in its own right, but I think rather than talk about like every individual drawing, it's just like I'm focusing more on just like the general sort of like overview of my work. But I mean, it's just like with this one, it's you know, this is an idea that I've explored before. It's just like this idea of just like, you know, those movements that are made with the bodies, and I've done a lot of drawings in the past with ideas of like contortion and sort of scrunching up and like opening up. And then it's just like those possibilities of, you know, it's just like, well, what could an arch become? And it's just like the idea of something, you know, it's like this becoming like, you know, it's just like significant as like a cave, which also like sort of starts to point back to just like the subconscious, and just like and like sort of that like kind of like going into those sort of like depths of the psyche. And with like with this drawing as well, this drawing was created during lockdown, and this is like probably one of my drawings that's like I can most directly pinpoint to like some particular thoughts I was having at the time. And this one was very much about that idea of it's like the impossibility of having encounters whilst we're in lockdown. So it's like, but also related to you know, it's just like just stories of you know, it's like goats starting to like roam free through the like sort of, you know, suburban areas, but it's like all the, you know, nature was enjoying a bit of like peace and quiet from like busy human traffic. And so sometimes it's like some of these ideas are actually kind of quite simple and just like happen straight away, and there might be a simplicity to it, whereas it's like other times there might be like lots and lots of layers. But I think as well there's one of the like usual references that I have is to like things like folklore and mythology. I think partly because like nature is used so much within folklore and mythology to actually, you know, to like convey things that aren't understood or like human experience. But also I think there's something about, especially like folklore, it's like there's a real simplicity to them. So unlike a novel, which is like where you have a rolling out, it's like a real like started to like roll out sort of like the setting and the scene and different characters. Something about this like folklore that is, you know, you're kind of in it straight away. There's no, you know, it's just like there's no need for this is like huge embellishment. It's just like, so this idea of like these snapshots, and within that as well, within that sparsity, it's just like everything kind of makes sense in them. There's no like real explanation, but it totally makes sense that there might be a conversation going on between a goat and a woman out on a walk. And playing around with sort of like very natural characteristics. I mean, like the octopus, you'll see there's particular animals or particular parts of like elements of nature that you'll see like repeated through my works and over the years. The octopus being one of them. But like with this one here, and again, if I can like relate this back to a particular time or like sort of like particular experiences, like this one's called Misfire. So this is, you know, an octopus ejecting its ink, which is a very natural thing to do. But with this, it's like what I was playing around with was the like with the composition and the combination of the title. It's this idea, it's like that it's actually you know, it's ejected its ink in defense, but it's just like, it's misjudged, so this, and it's now a little bit like sort of spent, maybe it's feeling a bit like not great about itself. But this is, you know, again, like sort of relates back to that sense of, you know, being in a relationship, having an argument, lashing out, you know, it's just like lashing out, it's just like, you know, misjudging, like, just misjudging. And this kind of brings me to the idea, like to another motif that runs through my work, which is the use of the threads. So this relates again to that sense of, everything like is linked up. It's like sort of notions of like entanglements. It's like in everything, like being linked to everything else. And also kind of refers a little bit to like my overall practice as well, in that and another that I've not put any of the work in particular like chronological order, because each individual artwork I see as being like a fragment of like an entire ongoing involving artwork, which is my practice. And so I'm always within here just like sort of seeing and really enjoy like kind of looping things back and like referring back to older works, like bringing just like sort of like different motifs in, and just like taking some out. And I do like to actually show, sometimes show like older works with newer works, because there's an ongoing, evolving kind of language that's running through it. And as well, some of the motifs that I use, I will have a different relationship with as I change in the world and the world changes around me, as I have different life experiences. And so the thread has been a motif within my practice for as long as I can remember. So like with the single thread here, it's that idea of there's again, it's just like looks at that sense of like balance of power, whether it's the thread has been placed there by the protagonist, or if it's something, that sense of like something other that's happening off the page. Is there something that's like has something or someone else actually like put them into this situation? And so like the simple line again, it's just like can actually convey a lot of meaning and relates back to that. So it's like the simplicity of just like a single line within drawing. And then with those threads becomes just like these more like complex entanglements. And again, it's just like these entanglements are something that's like runs throughout my entire practice right up until current day. And part of this as well is like thinking about those relationships with nature, those relationships with like the self, those relationships with others. It's just like kind of, I think especially with like relationships with, it's like as humans with others and ourselves, they're not always straightforward. It's just like, even our relationships with ourselves and our understanding of ourselves can be kind of messy and complex. And so it's just like the threads there, again, it's just like start to relate to that sense of being human and our relationships with this, like within our own psyche and our own understanding of ourselves as well. And I'd say as well, it's just like there's, I think a lot of my ideas do tend to come from like kind of quite a personal place as well. So whilst, so I think with, for me, I can see like an experience as like my own self in like every one of my works, because it's like they come from me. But at the end of the day, it's just like that autobiography is kind of present somewhere in a sublayer, but it's not essential. It's not like, I think one of the things that I really try to do with my work is really try and like sort of like maintain a balance, which means it's like that others can like relate to the works in their own way. And I think that balance as well, of having that balance of meaning as well. So trying to not be like too prescriptive with what the works mean, so that there's enough room to like have different readings of the work, and like so there's those different possibilities. And I think that balance as well also runs through into the physicality of drawing as well, because some of to maintain that balance sometimes comes down to the composition. It's just like a very like sort of slight shift of composition, very slight shift of body language in the work, or it's just like even like a shift in like the density of the pencil work, or it's just like looking at, like with the works that I've got on display here. There are actually different different types of drawing from my practice. Some of them are very, very loose and very light, whereas some of them, like with the large collage, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a bit, it's like very, very dense and layered. And again, this is like another form of entanglement as well. So it's This is, I'd call this, well, I kind of think about these ones as being like collage in space, so sometimes it's like I work with like cutout drawings. And so this is like the first, almost like the first stage of like slipping, literally slipping out the paper. But again, it's like playing around with like what entanglements could be. So I mean, for me, all of my, basically it's like any tail or like thread or fur is just like all up for entanglement. So, and this also relates to just like a natural phenomenon, but this is like there's also been a lot of like play with this as well. So it's like to create this like kind of like fake rat kings, but it's the understanding behind it is just like the rats get their tails all tangled up, and then it's just like become this like writhing mass that they can't escape each other. But it was also that kind of idea also is just like then will translate into the way that I work with the idea of like using other animals as well. So, you know, what would it look like if like if a wolf pack started to become tangled up, and what are those relationships with each other if they like literally can't get away from each other and become this writhing, furry, snarling mass. And so I think there's all of these just like ideas or just like memories of like just anything that I've that's caught my eye or that I remember. It's all in there. It's just like this constantly churning soup, which I'm like constantly just like picking bits out of and rearranging. And so this is where I really like to think of my practice as just like this ongoing, evolving, like one ongoing artwork that's just got many, many parts to it. And then it's to say, there's also another, so again, it's like thinking about, you know, ways of looking at, it's just like those layers between, it's just like the conscious and the subconscious and that inner and outer world. I think there is, so I do tend to use this notion of like inside and outside quite a lot in my work. And this has been happening more and more recently, I think, as well. So that can be like a sense of just like that relationship between just like the inner body, you know, just like between like the lungs and that inhaling and exhaling, but also that then playing around with ideas of like sort of something that's kind of quite ectoplasmic or like an expression, but then like with this piece here that's in the exhibition just around the corner. Like using things like gold leaf in there as well to just like add this like extra layer of like reflection, but also this something that's got quite a fungal kind of feel to it. But then it's just like adding this like layer of gold leaf is something that's kind of quite, I don't know, it's just like quite shiny, attractive, precious, something that's just. So it's also that I really like playing around with like contrast as well. So the contrast between like the light and dark of like the graphite, the contrast between the like sort of with gold leaf. It's you know, from one angle you'll stand and it looks quite dull, but from another, when the light catches it, then it'll like bright. You know, it'll become really bright. So I think it's so it's. I mean, I really love what the physicality of the materials can do themselves. And also there's the use of like this, and like this is something like the use of like water. This is like the images of water like is appearing more and more in my works as well, and in a lot of my sketches. And I have noticed over recent years as well, just like that I'd started to just be drawing a lot of these like half-submerged figures. And again, it's that sense of just like that threshold between just like the above and the below, and you know, it's just like the reflections in water. And so it's like, so water becomes like another metaphor for a threshold between one realm and another. And then it's just like playing around with the idea of like, you know, it's just like this eternal dribble, you know, it's just like this impossible eternal dribble. But also she seems quite calm about it. She doesn't seem like particularly excited to be there, but she doesn't seem particularly in distress. So I think it's that this is where that quiet contemplation of the figures in my works becomes really important, that it's not, I'm not giving too much of a prescriptive to say that they're in a particular state of like pleasure or pain. And I think this is where, as well, I've always really liked to play around with that fine balance between the playful and the macabre, and also it's like which again through the delicate nature of the pencil work, because there's something that's very intimate and delicate about it. It's also there's also, it's like offsetting that with the macabre. You've got that sort of like fine line again between something that could be quite beautiful, but is also a bit unsettling. And yeah, it's just like inside and outside of anything. So it's like the inside of a coat, the underneath of an arched back. It's just like all those, it's like different thresholds. So again, it's like the insides of clothing, that idea of like things that have been hidden. You know, it's like kind of collecting. You know, it's just like collecting and hiding things away. There's always just like thinking about just like that. You know, those different thresholds of like inside, outside, here and there. And I'll just coming back to another drawing that's in the exhibition as well. So this is a maypole, and so this one has got the threads in it again. But I also wanted to just include this one and mention this one because wolves appear a lot in my works. So wolves are like wolves. I've been drawing wolves for as long as I can remember as well. So again, it's you know, I've always had this fascination with the wolf. I think to say, and again, so my relationship with the wolf and the wolf image has and what it could mean has changed over the years as well. And so I think this dates back really to that combination of the way that the wolf can be. In a lot of fairy stories, you've got the fairy stories of the big bad wolf, and it's actually sort of, you know, it has this like negative connotations. But also, I remember like as a child, it's like really like loving the story of like Romulus and Remus as well. And so I kind of feel it's like from quite an early age, I had this dual like introduction to the wolf as quite a hated figure. But then also it's just like the she-wolf that raised Romulus and Remus in mythology. You know, it's like she was just like the wise mother. She was just like this, you know, it's like this powerful wild creature that was like nurturing and wise. And so I think right from a young age, it's like the image of the wolf has really, really fascinated me. And I say also like very, you know, well, in more recent years, I've been looking at the wolf in particular as it's like its relationship with just like, you know, as a symbol of like female empowerment, you know, it's like female power, it's just like that inner wolf as well, which does relate quite a lot to to the book The Women Who Run with the Wolves by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. So that's been, I'd say over the past few years, that's been kind of quite a significant text for me. But I think it's, you know, again, going back over my entire practice, and if you remember some of those like very early drawings, there was a drawing of a dog on like a Rizzler paper, a lost dog on Rizzler paper. And so I think this is where, so the wolf and the dog and the canine, it's a real spectrum for me. It's just like to find the symbolism for, you know, it's just like for wildness and domesticity. So like relates very much back to this like sense of being human, being, you know, it's like what's being repressed, what's being expressed, what's, you know, where's the, you know, it's like those inner animal instincts and like those, it's just like kind of those senses of like domesticity. And like with this one here, this one's called Unicorn, and I mean the idea of this one was this, you know, this is like the muffled howl. So it's a you know, a domestic looking dog with its head thrown back in a howl, but it's just like it's still muffled. So there's often a sense of like longing in my work as well, I would say. And this is I'll use this as a little segue as well. So I have actually written segue in my notes to it's like the cone. which brings us back to this work that's also around the corner. So the cone as well is another one of those motifs that appears quite regularly in my work. So it can refer to like the dunce's cap or to like witches' hats. And I think like and with that, it's also got that sliding scale as well between it's like the power of like the witch and also it's just like the shame of like a dunce's cap. But also I think with when I'm drawing like the women that I draw with these like pointed hats on, it's also referring back to like the persecution of women as witches as well, which is like often the persecution of the outspoken woman, or it's just like a suppression of society of that female power. So there's lots of like underlying like sort of uses of like motifs and like sort of like and like sort of symbolism in the work as well. And I'm also going to use this as another segue because this drawing, you'll notice, is actually is a lot more dense than some of the other works that I create. And so whereas a lot of my works tend to have this deliberate like sparseness to it, sometimes I really like to work with collage as well. So it's like this cutting out, layering up different textures, and this is one of those collages. But I also, when I work with animation, I treat that very much as collage as well. So a lot of every drawing that I make that goes into an animation, it always starts as a work on paper, and then I'll be digitally cutting it out, layering it up in like Photoshop or After Effects, and so it's a real. I'm using the digital part of it more like scissors and glue. So my animations are, this is an example of one of my earlier animations. They're always in these loops. So I started doing animation as, first of all, as a way to, another way of like locking something in time. So I would say that each of my works on paper are almost like a glimpse or like a frozen moment. And the animations, like they're like locked moments. They're always just like these acts that are repeated forever and ever. And I think it's also, coming back to the idea of, what a drawing is. It's like repeating and repeating and repeating marks. It's like, and every, the longer it's repeated, the different kind of relationship that you have with it, the different like experience it is. And also, it relates as well to my fascination again with like mythology. It's like the sense of just like repeated acts of like the underworld. It's like these repeated like punishments of the underworld. Of it's like Sisyphus is like pushing a rock eternally up a mountain and then having to start all over again. And so I think that's where my so a lot of my animations are like created to run forever. And so that's an example of like a single sort of a single screen piece. And then I'm just going to show you just two more. Just do a quick time check. I don't even know how we're doing for time. Okay, so I've just got two animations to show you. Each are 3 minutes each. If I can actually get to them. Okay, so I'm going to show you two examples of some animation installation works, and this is really collage on like a big scale, so all made up of individual animated loops that are then like collage, and also it's like working with sound artists as well. And so this is a piece that I did called Oracles, which are a 3-screen piece, and that ran as like it's like an entire like landscape around, so it's immersive work. And each screen like sort of talked to each other, and it's like had like different things either like mirrored or like moving around between the screens. And this was my first major like multiple screen collaged piece. And so I'd say that this is probably the closest to something having a beginning and an end that I've ever made, and I'll just like show you some excerpts from it. And it's like, so the whole idea behind this piece was like this journey, this from birth to death through like different elements of the subconscious. There was a lot of building up and like destroying. And so that was a piece I made in 2017. And just before I show you a clip from that, I'll also show you, and this is the most recent animation installation that I created, which was in the exhibition that's just closed at the Salford Art Gallery. And this was on an eternal loop. So this one actually was, well, you'll see from just some of the excerpts, but this was a continuous loop. And so this was the first time that I've really played around with a really multi-layered collage piece that actually like runs in a loop. So I'll show you just 3 minutes from Oracles, which is the early work, and then I'll follow it with 3 minutes from the most recent work, Whole. So. And I'll just show you 3 minutes from this new work as well. So this was a single projection onto, so as you can see here, so it's just like it was in sort of, a large projection into kind of quite well, it's just like a darkened room, so it was the only thing that was in there. So it's like the experience was, it's like this going into a cave and going underground. And so, also I'll just say that like each of these pieces are about, I think they're about 20 minutes long each. So this one, I'm just showing you some, just like the first few minutes, but with this newer piece, there's, I think there's like 30 different animated sequences that occur throughout the work. So I'll just show you just 3 minutes of that. And again, it's like worked with another sound artist on this to create the atmosphere.